I'll tell you that when Top Gun 2 came out, I had my mustache and I did not realize that Miles Teller was going to have one as well. And my wife was like, "Are you just trying to be like Miles Teller?" And I'm like, "No, dude, I had the mustache before the movie came out." But yeah, so maybe that's the stereotype I'm fulfilling, is the mustache and the hair.
Welcome to the Pilotbase Podcast, where pro pilots share their challenging and sometimes messy journey to the cockpit, the wins, the losses that almost made them quit, and the lessons they wish they knew earlier. Today, we're honored to have Blaise Curtis with us. Blaise is a 9-year Coast Guard pilot assigned to fly C-27J Spartan out of Florida. How you doing, Blaise?
Good, brother. How are you?
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming. We're stoked to have you here. You have so much good advice and awesome experience.
Yeah, man, excited to be here.
Yeah, let's start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself. We don't meet a lot of Coast Guard pilots here, so we'd love to hear what you guys do.
Yeah, ironically enough, there's probably been under 6,000 total Coast Guard pilots that have like ever been around. So it's definitely one of the smaller communities when it comes to aviation, especially in the military world. But I grew up in a Coast Guard family, and then actually attended the Coast Guard Academy where I studied mechanical engineering, played lacrosse, and then finished. And unlike a lot of my peers, I was a little bit nervous for my decision after graduation and commissioning to determine like my career path. So I actually went to a shipboard engineering tour. So I was in charge of a bunch of people going and taking fuel samples and oil samples on a national security cutter in the Coast Guard, stationed out of Charleston for a little over a year before I got picked up for flight training.
Nice.
I was actually on my second attempt, for anybody out there keeping track at home. And then I went to naval flight training after that, which started out in Pensacola. You do that with the Navy and Marines. That training program at the time was about 2-ish years. I finished up, and then I went to multi-engine flight training, which is in Corpus Christi, Texas, and then did my first tour as an operational Coast Guard pilot in Sacramento. Finished 5 years there, and now I'm actually the assistant aeronautical engineering officer for the C-27 down in Clearwater too. So that's what I'm doing now. Enjoying most days, like most people, I guess, in the aviation community. But yeah, definitely a little bit different, I think, from other people in different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't realize you came from a Coast Guard family. Did both your parents serve?
Just my dad. Yeah, he did 33 years and 8 months in the Coast Guard, and actually was the 75th ever Master Cutterman, which is essentially an accolade that is given to somebody for spending 20 years of sea time. So he did it on black hull construction style of boats. But for the most part, that was why we were bouncing around a lot when I was growing up, living in a bunch of different states and kind of picking up and moving every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Did you like growing up in a military family? I have 2 young boys too, so not so much since I separated, but prior to that, we moved around quite a bit. How was that for you? Did you like that?
Yeah, I personally did. I think that it definitely forced me to be okay with being the new person in a room, getting to know other people. And it comes with its own challenges as well. Like if I kind of live or am in a spot a little bit too long, I get a little bit antsy, which is a little bit different from somebody who grew up in the same town forever. But I'm thankful for what it did for my personality as I grew up and all the things I got to see. Not many people can say they lived in Hawaii a handful of times and have bounced all over the U.S. and been able to use those moves as kind of like mini vacations between places.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
for sure. That's awesome. I'm curious, so your dad wasn't a flyer, but was there somebody in your life like early on that kind of steered you towards aviation, or was it just being in the community and go? Because you guys have over in Oahu, right? There's a huge Coast Guard base. I've seen them flying in and out, right?
Yeah, so a couple things. My dad was not a flyer. He was, like I said, a boat driver primarily for the majority of his career. And I like to tell him that we operate in 3 dimensions and he only operated in 2, so it makes me the superior operator. I like to give him a hard time.
Very cool. Yeah, very true. Very true.
That's right. But at the end of the day, the impetus for me wanting to become a pilot actually came when I was a kid. So we were living in Old Saybrook, Connecticut at the time, which is right near New London. Actually, the Coast Guard Academy is there. And little did I know, Cape Cod, Massachusetts was a H-60 place where we fly like the Jayhawk, which is our, similar to the Army Black Hawk plane, but we just basically transitioned it to be a search and rescue asset for the Coast Guard. But long story short, we're hosting at our house at the time, which is actually the coolest house I think I've ever lived in. It was Fenwick, in the town of Fenwick at the Lind Point Lighthouse, which with like neighbors with Katharine Hepburn, which was like really, really outrageous. Yeah. And like in this very affluent area, but we're in this military housing that just happened to be on this like point. A lighthouse was 80 feet off our front door. And we had our own like private beach, super, super cool house. And I'm 6 years old at the time. We're hosting a Christmas party, and I'm sitting there in the house, and I like vividly remember this story. I hear this like whooshing sound. I'm like, what is that? And I like walk over, and there's some parent like giving me like the I know something you don't know grin. And they're like, oh, like go check it out, go see. And I walk outside, and there's a 60 helicopter landing on our basketball court. And Santa gets out with like a bag full of presents, and I'm like awestruck. I'm like, oh
yeah, mine's blown. Hard to not get on board with that.
Insane. I was like, it's insane. So I see that happen, and I'm like, dude, I want to do that. Like, that's what I want to do. And from the time I was 6 years old, I was like, I want to go be a pilot in the Coast Guard. Initially, I wanted to fly helicopters, and we can talk about the transition to flying fixed wing planes, like what I'm doing now. But yeah, that was like the original. That's why I want to fly, and that's kind of where I landed. Landed.
Yeah, nice. See what you did
in the job.
That's cool. So you wanted to be Santa Claus when you were 6 years old. That's awesome.
Dude. I guess that's what it is. Yeah.
That's cool, man. I like that. You mentioned earlier that you applied twice to get into flight school, and I think that like that experience is not something that's very common in a lot of people's lives. There's not a lot of people that get into flight school, and there's, not a lot of people that apply to flight school. And I know, like personally, I applied 3 times to go to officer training school before I got it. Right. So I know what that's like. And I'm curious for you, like, how did you stay motivated? Right. So you say you graduated the academy, you're commissioned, right? And then you're applying to flight schools. The first time they said no, like, how did you not lose all your momentum and just the energy around that? Like, you just came out of the academy. That's a huge accomplishment, right? You must have been feeling 10 feet tall, and then to get told no on flight school. Did that help your motivation, or did that slow you down?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too. So going to the ship, you kind of check in, and they're like, oh, hey, like, what do you want to do? And when I checked in there, I kind of gave them the honest answer, like, I'm not sure, but I think I want to go to fly. And the first application window rolled around a handful of months after I had been there. So, I had probably 4 or 5 months to make an impression. And then, beyond that, I'm able to only make so much of an impact after knowing the guys I'm working with. I had to get qualified on the boat myself before I can truly start to like help the ship in general, kind of like steer the mission forward, if you will. So when I'm finishing all of that process, I like end up putting my application up, and I'm like, I got pretty good grades in school. Like I'm working super hard. And when I got the list, because they actually publish it, I'm not sure if the Air Force does it the same way, but they have like a general message board, like via like the online Coast Guard like forums. And essentially that message board publicizes all the people that got picked up for whatever programs, whether it be graduate school, promotion, all of these things kind of go out there publicly for people to see. So I saw the list, and nobody had reached out to me because my name wasn't on it to like congratulate me. And I saw the list, and my name was not on the list. So ironically enough, I used it as more fuel to the fire. I printed it out, and I actually taped it to the mirror on like in my office stateroom of the boat, and then like looked at it like every single day when I got up. And I was like, I want to be on the next list here. How am I going to do that every single day? And how am I going to show up to work, to help motivate our guys to get work done there? And that kind of actually helped, I think, do the opposite and help motivate, to help me push harder to to leave the place as good as I could, and better than I found it, if you will, and then end up getting picked up the next time around.
That's an awesome story. That's powerful to see it every day too, like that, you know? Like a common theme I've been noticing with a lot of pilots is, um, a lot of pilots who made it through, I mean, though it seems like they all hit hurdles, right? And some of them are pretty common, right? Like I'm sure you've hooked a couple stand-ups, you've hooked a couple rides, right? And had those mean debriefs. But then there's all these other like kind of personal struggles along the way. Like some people didn't have any family support, or maybe everyone in their circle is telling this is not a realistic dream, right? And to focus on something else. Um, and then, of course, there's people like me who didn't get in first try, right? You just have to build your package, make yourself better. It seems like that's what you did. I'm curious if you've noticed that thread along really successful pilots to that resiliency and that self-motivation. Do you think that that's a key driver for pilots who make it?
I think so, man. I truly believe that there's nobody who is perfect 100% of the time, and if for some reason you're in that position, you feel like you've not hit a snag, just wait. It'll probably end up happening to you at some point. And I truly feel like there's a little bit of humility that goes into that, and it reminds you that in the flying community, especially, like you're dealing with high altitude, high speeds, other people that sometimes can be unpredictable, and other people that potentially could make mistakes as well. So it's definitely a job that I think is more of a profession, and versus a job. And a profession, I'll talk like lawyer, doctor, pilot. I think falls in that realm, to where you kind of have to be a bit of a lifelong learner, be somebody who has a little bit of that resilience. Because if you get a little bit complacent or comfortable, sometimes that could end up leading to something going wrong, that you can't potentially recover from as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's totally accurate. So going back now to flight training, was there any part of that that you underestimated or maybe thought you were prepared for that you just didn't know? You know, there's so
Oh
many
yeah.
struggles that come up. You're hungry and sleepy. You don't understand. Like, how was that for Blaise Curtis?
Oh my gosh, dude. I've got a really funny story. So, the first time that I actually got into a plane that I would fly myself, it's a Cessna. And for those of you that have ever done any amount of flight training, you're probably in the same boat. And I had a stick buddy, so another guy who was going through Naval Flight School at the time, and he had his PPL, so he had his private pilot license, and he's sitting in the front seat with the instructor, and he went first. And naturally, because he had flown the same plane before, he's pretty familiar. He's doing a lot of the radio calls. He knows how to maneuver the plane. He's doing the takeoffs and landings. And I'm kind of sitting in the back, just like enjoying the ride, because I had never been in a small plane like that before. And I'm like, this is so cool. I'm like listening to the radio, but really just like taking in all the sights, like looking around, almost like the kid in right field, like picking daisies,
Yeah,
in a baseball
yeah,
game.
yeah.
And we end up switching seats after his hour or so hop is over. And I get in the front, and the instructor's like, "All right, man, like let's go." Probably assuming that I also knew what I was doing. And I hit the rudder pedals for the first time, and then I look over to him and I'm like, "Dude, where's the gas, bro? Like, I don't know like what I'm doing here." And
You were
he
looking for the gas and the rudder
Dude,
puddles?
I'm telling you, this is real. This is a
Wow,
real
Blaze.
story. Like hitting the rudder pedals, and obviously the plane is not moving. And then he goes, "Dude, it's right here," and it's like the lollipop throttle that everybody knows in a Cessna. Ironically enough, again, like they took me, who knew absolutely nothing about flying, into now I'm signing for a $30 million aircraft that has potentially 50, 60 people on it at its max like capacity. So there's a lot of different wickets that they make you hit along the way, and you got to work super hard. But I definitely had my fair share of struggles, knowing that I'm starting from ground zero, to then have to learn, which some of the instructors were happy about, because they're like, "Hey, you don't have bad habits. You don't think that you know much of anything, so you're going in with that kind of beginner's mindset." But I definitely think like, oh, it might have been a little bit helpful for me to have done a flight simulator a time or two before I got in the plane.
That's probably the funniest first flight story I've ever heard. I've heard really similar things too from IPs, right? Instructor pilots saying they prefer students, especially military side, with no flying experience because they don't have bad habits. they don't make incorrect radio calls. And even like, I think pattern turns are different in GA, right? I'm wondering for you with all your experience now in the Coast Guard, do you prefer training pilots with less GA experience or do you like a little bit of experience?
To be honest, I think it really depends on the person. It's going to depend like how does the person show up to to come and fly. For the most part, I think if the person has that like beginner's mindset and is able to kind of be humble along the way, I don't think it really matters. But I think if somebody comes in and thinks that they kind of know everything and you kind of feel that, and then they're trying to tell you how to operate, especially if you're kind of doing more of the instructing role, then I think it ends up being more difficult to show and to help kind of improve, which is the goal anyway.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So in the Coast Guard now, I'm curious, do you have like what's your most memorable mission you've flown? Any single sortie? Like what moment are you most proud of in your Coast Guard aviation career?
Man,
Must be a lot. You got a lot of cool sorties in there, right?
there's been a couple things that I've been like really thankful to have done. I'll say just as a quick anecdote, when I was stationed in Sacramento, I was fortunate to be able to do, we call them drops, which is essentially like practicing kicking out search and rescue gear over Lake Tahoe, which is like the coolest thing ever. You're at like 6,000 foot field elevation and you're 200 feet above the water in a bowl that is surrounded by mountains, getting the snow report and then flying back to the air station after kicking search and rescue gear out to people that are going to pick it up and trying to hit a target. You know, that super cool experience doing that and flying through Half Dome and in the west side of the country. I think that's super pretty over there. But as far as operationally, very different from the Air Force, Phil, and I know that you're an Air Force guy, so this is going to make you sad, but we deploy to places like El Salvador, Puerto Rico, Miami has been a deployment spot that I've done. Portland, Oregon has
Okay,
been a
yeah.
deployment spot I've done. So we go to places that are typically warm, sunny, and for the most part, like not in the middle of nowhere, which is really nice. So I was down in Puerto Rico, and there had actually been a sailboat that set off their EPIRB. So for the people that don't know what an EPIRB is, it's an emergency position indicating radio beacon, which essentially is like an SOS signal in the middle of the water. So we're walking out to the plane, and they're like, "Hey, an EPIRB went off. We think it's legit. We want you guys to go fly on it." So we flew from Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, which is basically like the northwest point, probably about an hour and a half towards the Turks and Caicos, and found a guy that had run his catamaran. Him and his partner had run the catamaran into a rock, took on water, and now they're sitting in a lifeboat essentially that's like sitting right next to it, sea anchored out. Thankfully, the water's pretty warm. We had good communications with them, but we had to essentially stay on scene with them until we could get one of the Coast Guard helicopters over there to hoist them to bring them back. So we're staying there for a couple of hours, keeping an eye on them. It starts to get pretty late and dark, so we start dropping flares to help the helicopter. We like basically end up vectoring a helicopter in to do the hoist, and then at that point we have reached a position where it was more advantageous for us to go back to the Turks and Caicos to get fuel before we return to Puerto Rico. So we went to the Turks and Caicos, which is actually where the 60 went as well. So there's a photo, maybe I'll send it to you and you can attach it to this.
Oh,
Me like meeting, and this was like my first Coast Guard search and rescue case as well, meeting the
wow.
same people that we just facilitated the rescue of and like standing next to the helicopter. And the person flying the 60 was actually somebody I knew at the Coast Guard Academy as well. So
Really?
it was like a super interesting way of like kind of coming full circle to be like, oh man, like this mission matters. We finally made it to this like position where like, hey, all of this hard work that we've done. And then we reached a position where like this person potentially may not have made it back if we were not there, we were not trained, and we weren't ready to do what we were doing. So it was super cool.
That's incredible. I'm curious personally, what altitude did you have when you found, like, so I guess you were going off a beacon when you found him, right? But what altitude were you holding 'cause I assume you had to have visual the whole time.
Yeah, so our plane at the time, and even throughout Coast Guard's got a couple different, I'll say like mission capabilities with their aircraft. Some of them have a little bit better like FLIR capabilities, which is essentially like a camera off the side of the plane. And it really depends on the cloud coverage as well. So Customs and Border Patrol and other entities can sometimes have higher power cameras and tech suite to be able to detect people through a bunch of clouds. At the time, our plane could not do that. So we had to utilize a FLIR ball and stay below the cloud layer, which I think we were probably around like 3,000 feet and able to see them off the water. And then when we did our drop, we do those typically a little bit closer to the water, somewhere in the realm of 200 or so feet, where we keep the gear out. So pretty low to the water. There's not the helicopters obviously get super low when they're doing hoists and when they're kicking swimmers out and stuff. I've got a buddy who flies the 65, which is a Dolphin for the Coast Guard, slightly smaller than the 60. And they said they're not allowed to go lower than 5 feet because the tail will go in the water at that point. So
5 feet?
yeah, they're pretty low off the water, man. We operate in that crazy environment for sure.
That's wild. So you got your ATP license as well, right?
Yeah, man, you got it. I went and did that in August of 2025. Yeah,
Congrats, Blaise.
yeah,
That's
thanks.
huge. That's cool. Was that to help you with your Coast Guard life, or are you, I guess, planning ahead for the life after the Coast Guard?
Yeah, I'm a options person. I definitely like to keep all the doors open when I can. The Coast Guard has a really unique program called Coast Guard Cool. It's like a credentialing program. And essentially, what you can do is you can apply to use up to about $5,000 per year towards your credentialing for education purposes, licenses, and things of that nature. So I took that and I applied that to my ATP. So I did my CTP in 2024 in Dallas, and then I finished with my ATP in Jasper, Alabama, with the good people of Sanders Aviation,
Sure.
and finished that thing up, which was really awesome as well.
That's cool. I'm really curious now. So like with all your flying, right? Different statuses too. I know it's different from the Air Force, but I assume you guys have different loadouts, different fields that you're using, probably some short, some long, right? I'm curious how Blaise Curtis keeps track of all his flying time to where it's accurate enough to where like the ATP license, once that checkpoint comes up, you're ready to go, man. You got everything documented. You got your clean totals, your flight summaries. Like, how did you keep
Dude, you know
everything
the
so
answer to this
organized?
question. You know the answer. It's very funny actually. So the military, and I'm sure it was this way when you were in as well. They do a paper logbook and have done a paper logbook for forever. So we've got literally like a small, military issue, standard issue logbook that we'll just continue to fill up. But before I went to go do my ATP, I actually reached out to the people at Log 10, I guess the prequel to now Pilotbase, to get connected with them to be like, hey, I'm looking to get a digital logbook that I can have all of my time super clear, so it can help me create my required documentation for the FAA, so I can submit all my paperwork to complete my ATP. I ended up going with Log 10 and then basically batching through all of my previous time after taking hours and hours and hours to log and count all of that time up and verify it against my military logbook. And then I basically predated that, had it ready to go so that when I went to go get my ATP, all the numbers checked out and they could kind of fill that stuff in, sign the endorsement, and then we were good to go. Yeah.
So we talked a lot about all the cool things you've done, right? You wanted to be Santa Claus. You got in the Coast Guard Academy, you self-motivated yourself through flight school. You learned where to lean the gas out on the airplane. It's not by your feet,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So let's hear a little bit about the struggle bus stories, man. I know being a military aviator, an aviator in general, can take a toll on you personally, physically, right? It's physically demanding. Mentally, it's demanding. You have to be all in all the time. And also, I know you have a family too. It was always really hard on the wife and kids, right? You got to pick up, you got to fly when they need you to, and you're going to be gone until they say you're done, right? So I'm curious what that's been like for you and how you deal with all that, the physical, mental, the family aspects.
I I'm a very, I guess, like structured person in my personal life, and I'm that way because I have an awesome support system with my friends and family, and my wife as well. And I also run a online personal training business as well, Blue Chip Athletic Club, and that was kind of bred out of a struggle that I had through naval flight school, as well as kind of into my early days of flying. So to back up, the Coast Guard and Naval Flight School utilizes the T6 Texan, which I believe is used in most military platforms as well as the Air Force.
Yeah, I
To
flew
fly.
T6.
Yeah. So when I'm getting ready to go fly the T6, I had left the shipboard community where I was lifting, working out super, super heavily, which has always been something that's been good for my physical and mental health. But I get to our aeromedical process to where they're like, hey, we're taking your measurements, like anthro measurements, where they're taking like, hey, this is the distance between your fingertips to your elbow crease, and then your hip distance from hip pocket to knee, and they have to essentially make sure that you can fit in the aircraft that you're going to fly. And then for a lot of the Navy bubbas, it will qualify or disqualify them from other platforms such as jets if they're too tall, and what have you. So I'm going through that process, and I get on the scale, and the guy's like, "Oh, dude, you're 230," and I'm like, "Yeah." So like at that point, I had been, I'm about 6 foot tall, and I'm 230 pounds, and I'm the strongest I'd ever been, like picking up really heavy weights, over 300 pounds on a bench press, and I'm squatting over 400 pounds and deadlifting over 500 pounds. I felt really great about that.
Feeling good.
But during that time, they're like, "Hey, dude, if you gain another pound, the ejection seat is rated at 231, and you can't fly this plane. So your flying career is essentially over because you need to be able to fly this plane to be able to continue and finish flight training." So I kind of get this hit in the gut of like, "Hey, what matters to you? Where are you going to go now? And what's important to me?" And what I've deduced and found is that longevity is really, really important. I want to wake up and be pain-free, and I want to help other people look, move, and feel their best as well, whether that's in or out of the cockpit, which kind of has led me to launching the business and doing that as well. But the reality is that that's why I started doing that in the first place. And I was on like a weight loss journey. I enjoyed doing that. And then, like I said, I've got a support of a spouse that's like, "Hey, go do those things that you enjoy and light you up and give you life and vitality." And then when the Coast Guard calls to do a hurricane evacuation or go on X, Y, or Z deployment, she's like, "Hey, I'll take care of the stuff here at home, so that you can go do those things. And then when we come back, we're able to kind of spend that time together and get back to it." So, that airline life, from what I understand, and I'm obviously not an airline pilot, is very similar, and that the time that you're away is something to definitely weigh in the event that you end up going that path. And I think that the Coast Guard life and military and the aviation life in general is pretty similar in that way too. You kind of have to weigh the time that you're going to spend at home and the time you'll spend deployed, whether you're naval style aviator on a carrier or something like that on a deployment, or for you guys in the Air Force, you used to be able to deploy out to some sort of other country as well for extended periods of time. So something else that you have to kind of consider when you're trying to figure out like what your path is.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know Blue Chip's really taken off, and you have a really solid following. Has there ever been a moment in your career, your Coast Guard career, where you thought maybe you'd focus more on Blue Chip and less flying, or have you always just loved flying?
It's funny, like I told you before, I'm an options guy for sure, and I like to have a lot of the options in front of me. And initially, I thought when I launched Blue Chip that I had to have my life kind of separate, my business life and my Coast Guard life. And the more and more that I continue in the aviation community, in the business community, is that I can't do that. And I've decided like, hey, I need to be who I am, which is I am a pilot. I am a former athlete. I am a military pilot. To be honest, and this may be a opinion shared by some of your audience or not, but like a pilot at the end of the day is an overpaid bus driver. Like, especially in the commercial aviation world, like you have sleep schedules that are challenging, food limitations, you're sitting for extended periods of time. It's a challenging, demanding schedule on your body, on your mind, and all these things like stacking up. It's like, hey, how do you build the most holistic person that can be. And I want to do that for myself and then help other people do that as well. So I guess to answer your question, like I want to continue to lean into things that light me up and give me energy, which is flying and health and wellness too.
Saying you want to go into aviation, it's kind of an uncommon thing to actually make it all the way through. So there's a lot of naysayers and a lot of just FUD that you're going to hear along the way, right? Um, and I can remember a point in my career when I connected with a person who did what I did, right? I was prior enlisted. So I met someone who commissioned and ended up going to flight school and they wore wings, right? And there's a lot of other pilots I talked to who always wanted to be a pilot, didn't know where to start. Maybe they go to a small local airfield and they'll talk to the old guy drinking coffee by his 172, right? And that's often where the best advice comes from. And I think being in the military, we have access to a lot more people like that. And it's way more natural, right? If I join your unit and I'm not a flyer, but I want to be, it would not at all be unusual for me to go up to you and start asking you for advice, right? But what would you say to the people who want to go into aviation who are not in the military? They don't have connections like that. Where would you recommend they go find people like that that are going to support them, give them good advice, and just knock down the FUD along the way? Where do you think they can find those people?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of those communities that exist. I'll say, I would say this platform is probably a great place to start. I mean, you guys are starting. I know this is our early adoption of the Pilotbase Podcast, but you're starting to hear some of those people that are like, hey, here's where I was. And I'll leave all of my contact information as well for anybody who ends up being like, oh, the military pilot life is interesting. And then, for anybody listening as well that's interested in kind of helping their health along the way too, we've written training programs for commercial pilots and military pilots as well that we'll give to you guys for free for anybody that listens too. But the reality is, like, if you're able to find your way into one of those communities, whether that's a flying club, maybe it's a local military unit, like those things exist. If you're in like high school or in your like early college ages, like finding some sort of a club, a hobby, maybe it's a group on Facebook or something like that you can kind of lean into. A local airport, there's a lot of those that are around that are like EAA flying clubs that do community outreach. We do unit tours all the time at our air station here in Clearwater for kids that are in elementary school all the way through high school. Even like Sea Cadet style, or people that are in a JROTC or ROTC status as well. So be like open, I guess, to putting yourself out there a little bit would be my big piece of advice. And don't be afraid to be told no, because the one no may end up kind of making you a little bit upset, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other people out there that would be more than willing to kind of help steer you in the right direction if you just continue to ask.
I think that's good advice. You mentioned you do a lot of tours with like elementary schools and stuff. What do they like to see when they go see your aircraft? They just want to sit in the cockpit of the Spartan, or they want to see the search and rescue stuff? What are they into?
Yeah, they kids love sitting in the cockpit. That's kind of like the thing that gets them excited, and really getting people excited about aviation is the key. So maybe it's not a Coast Guard helicopter that they end up flying or a fixed wing plane, but they end up flying a regional at some point or a Cessna 172, and they think back to that time like you got truly excited. And that's, I think, the best part about having kids come. It's like kids still are able to like express that emotion of like pure joy and excitement, and they don't feel like bad about it, because I think some adults kind of start to tame that down because it's a little bit cool to care, you know what I'm saying? And
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they're just
Yeah.
going to be balls of energy and enjoy those things. So, figuring out what lights kids up or letting them play with some search and rescue gear. I mean, that's a lot of the stuff that we end up doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to go on a tour of that. As you were talking about that pure joy, the real joy, the genuine joy that kids get when they walk into the hangar for the tour, right? Probably their first time on a military installation, probably their first time in a military aircraft hangar, right? And almost certainly their first time in a Spartan. So I'd imagine the kids have a hard time containing that joy, and it's so pure, and I love that. And I'm curious, when was the last time that you felt that joy flying?
Man, it's really funny. People will like think it's pretty cheesy, but I truly enjoy every day that I get to go out and fly. There's a couple times though where things just kind of all go right, and you feel like you're kind of in what I'll call your flow state, and that's I think when I get the most amount of joy. So an example I'll give you is in our aircraft, you typically need to be very ahead of the plane. And this is similar in commercial aviation from the people that I've talked with as well. It's like you need to kind of be one, two, three steps forward of what you've got going on, or else you'll get behind. And then by the time you're supposed to be putting the plane down, you're like, oh, I missed out. I didn't run X, Y, or Z checklist, or this person is here and it's not necessarily working out the best. So the time where I end up like having the most fun is when I find myself in that flow state of like, hey, I'm right here to where this task is very challenging. It's not too challenging, and it's also like something I'm enjoying and having fun with, so that I'm kind of living in that perfect kind of zone. And for me, I need like the mental stimulation. So hey, we're going to go and do some like bounces. And then when one of the guys in the back of the plane is like, oh, sir, did we even like touch the ground on that one? I'm like, oh, dude, like, come on, man. That just makes your day, you know? So
For landing, brother.
that's right, man. There's nothing like being told by somebody in the back who's been flying with other people for a bit that's like, oh, man, like I didn't even know we touched the ground. I'm like, hey, dude, don't tell me that. I'll walk out of the plane and I won't be able to get my head through the door. So I'll have to
Yeah.
like pull the air out of it, you know?
Yeah, man. That's cool. That's a good feeling. Must be nice. Don't know that I've had it, but sounds cool. Yeah,
Hey, the
that's cool.
blind squirrel. Blind
Must
squirrel
have been the
flies a nut.
mustache
That's right.
flying that day, Blake.
What was that?
It must have been the mustache flying that
It
day.
must have been, man. Yeah, I say George was flying that day and the blind squirrel found a nut, I guess, right?
Yeah, everyone gets one.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah.
We do have a series of questions we like to call rapid fire questions we save towards the end. If you're cool, I'd just like to fire some off your way and you send them back.
For sure. Let's do it.
All right, Blaise, who is your favorite historic pilot?
Boy, we've got to go Elmer Stone, the OG Coast Guard pilot.
What's your favorite pilot stereotype or tradition?
I'll say that the number one rule of being a pilot is always look cool. So I'll take that to the bank.
Nice, love it. Look cool, sound cool. What's your favorite aircraft you've ever flown and why?
Oh, this is tough. It's probably going to be the T6, and it's because I have never operated an aircraft 15 feet from another one at 240 knots flying formations, and there's nothing that makes you feel cooler than ripping that thing around like a Ferrari.
Yeah, it is that's
The
a
naval
cool
flight
look.
training process is super cool for doing that, and I'm sure it's similar in the Air Force as well.
Yeah, very cool, man. Very cool. If you could start all over again, would you do it any differently? I'm talking, the academy, going to flight school, blue chip, all your coaching you do along the way. Would you do anything differently?
I don't think so, to be honest. I'm pretty thankful for the way that the chips have fallen so far. Obviously, like hindsight being 2020, you're like, oh man, I could have made like this one small different choice or decision. But I think all of that kind of informs your decisions now, and then is able to kind of affect and imprint you. So the benefit of having all those experiences is it's like life is kind of like going to an ice cream bar, and it's an all you can eat buffet, and you get to kind of pick and choose between the goods that you see from all the different things, and you're building your own, flavor of ice cream or blizzard, if you will, to be able to kind of continue on in your flying career or life. So I've enjoyed being able to take the experiences from all those things and kind of move on.
A solid Blizzard reference, by the way.
Dude,
I don't
there's
want to
nothing
lose.
like a blizzard, man. Come on now.
Nothing, no DQ. What's your least favorite aircraft you've flown? If you like the T6, what was your least favorite?
It was probably the plane that I did my ATP and the Beechcraft, just because it felt ancient to me and it climbed like a pig.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
All right, no, all show, no go then.
Yeah, yeah.
Stereotypical toxic pilot traits. Does Blaise Curtis have any of them?
Ooh, probably. I've been told that in a group of like 10 dudes that are, out in the military together, like people immediately identify me as the guy that's probably in, which is probably a function of my mustache. Potentially the nice hair, maybe that's
It's the hair and the
that's a bad thing
mustache.
too,
Yeah.
but
All right, I asked for your most toxic. I'm going to put that down as your greatest strength as well,
I
Blaise.
appreciate it. Thanks, dude.
Yeah, man. I got you. I got another rapid fire for you, Blaise. I didn't write it down. All right, Blaise, what's your call sign and how did you earn that?
What's funny is the Coast Guard doesn't really do call signs. Interestingly enough, we've got one unit that does it, and it's the Hitron unit, which a lot of people don't know this as well. This might be a good selling point for Coast Guard aviation, is that there's a unit in the Coast Guard that flies the MH-65 Dolphin, which is our smallest helicopter, with a gunner that has a 50 caliber sniper rifle mounted off the side of it, and they shoot out the engines of go fast vessels, typically smuggling drugs or narcotics up into the U.S. And those guys typically end up getting call signs because it's kind of like a tradition of that unit. But I do not have one. Actually, that's not true. I lied to you. My call sign was leash law. And the reason is because I used to bring my dog to the air station in Sacramento. And
Okay.
when I would go to the air station with my dog, I would not put her on a leash ever. So people in California did not love that all the time. Even when I was on the hikes and stuff like that outside, actually the people at the unit loved it, but they deemed me leash law, and I kind of forgot about it until just now. So
Here, that's a good one. All right. And then if somebody wanted your job today, what would you tell them to start doing now?
Ooh, I would honestly just say like be open to opportunities that kind of present themselves to you. If you ask me, I graduated the Coast Guard Academy in 2017. If you were to say, hey, in 9 years, you're going to be managing a hangar deck of 150 people, you're going to be flying this aircraft, doing this mission, I would have said you're out of your mind. They're just kind of taking that one step at a time and being like, hey, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, or you're not looking at Everest from the top and being like, oh man, I've got to do all this at once. So I think it's really important to just take it one step and not be afraid to to say yes to those things that light you up and kind of follow those breadcrumbs like I was talking about before.
Yeah, follow your dreams. Blaise, that's all really awesome advice. Excited to share it out.
Sweet. I think it was great, man.
Yeah, it's fun talking to pilots about pilot stuff. So that's pretty cool. That's a good day, Blaise. I
Yeah,
didn't
it
go
doesn't
flying
suck,
today.
man. The views from
Yeah, it doesn't
the views
suck.
from the desk don't suck.
Yeah, true.
I had a great time. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.